The witch trials in Europe were a dark and perplexing chapter in history, filled with fear and superstition. Imagine a time when the mere accusation of witchcraft could send shivers down the spine of an entire village. From the 15th to the 18th century, Europe was gripped by a witch-hunting frenzy, with an estimated 100,000 people prosecuted and around 40,000 to 60,000 executed. The epicenter of this hysteria was the Holy Roman Empire, where the trials were particularly severe. Picture this: a small, candle-lit courtroom filled with anxious townsfolk, the air thick with tension. The accused, often women, stood trembling as they faced charges of consorting with the devil, casting spells, and causing mischief. The evidence? Sometimes it was as flimsy as a neighbour's bad dream or a cow's sudden illness. Torture was commonly used to extract confessions, leading to dramatic and often tragic outcomes. In Germany, the witch-hunting craze reached its peak, with nearly half of all European witchcraft executions occurring there. France, Switzerland and Belgium also saw their fair share of trials, while England, Russia and Southern Europe were somewhat less fervent in their persecution. The trials were not just about superstition, they were also a means of social control, often targeting the vulnerable and marginalised. This video is part 3 of our History of Witchcraft series, and if you haven't yet watched parts 1 and 2, pause this video and watch those first, as you don't want to miss a thing about discovering the fascinating history of how magic developed over millennia. Our story begins in 1022, with the first recorded execution of heretics in Western Europe. Though not about witchcraft, it set the stage for the brutal persecution that followed. In Orleans, France, a small Christian sect led by canons Stephen and Lisios practiced celibacy, vegetarianism, and rejected church sacraments. The Council of Orleans deemed them heretical, accusing them of making Eucharist from human ashes and worshipping the devil, claims eerily similar to those in later witch trials. On King Robert II of France's orders, the sect members were excommunicated and burned alive. About 13 people met this grim fate, though their names remain unknown. This fiery end was a common punishment for heretics and perceived threats to the Church. In 1140, the Decretum Gratiani was compiled by Gratian, a Benedictine monk. This work aimed to harmonise the contradictory canon laws of the Catholic Church and included laws against witchcraft. It provided a legal framework for condemning and prosecuting witchcraft, becoming a foundational text for canon law in medieval Europe. Now we return back to France. In 1190, the Gnostic sect known as the Cathars faced severe accusations of witchcraft. Gnosticism, if you're unfamiliar, involves ancient religious ideas claiming secret knowledge about the divine and humanity, viewing humans as divine beings trapped by an evil deity. The Cathars rejected material wealth, meat, and worldly pleasures, striving for spiritual liberation through a pure life without Christian mediation. They criticized the Roman Catholic Church for its moral corruption and materialism. Seen as a threat, the Church accused the Cathars of satanic rituals and witchcraft, leading to the Albigensian Crusade initiated by Pope Innocent III to eradicate them. These charges served as a political tool to justify harsh measures and rally support, ultimately leading to the Cathars' persecution and the destruction of their communities. In 1326, Pope John XXII issued a decree called Super Illius Specula, condemning witchcraft and heresy. He declared that witches were consorting with the devil and deserved execution by burning, hanging, or beheading. Fast forward 50 years, and England's good parliament decided to crack down on sorcery and conjuration. They passed laws to criminalise these practices, leading to severe penalties and a witch hunt frenzy. This move bolstered the Church's power to prosecute alleged witches, often based on flimsy evidence or personal grudges. In 1479, Scotland saw its first recorded witch trial with Joannet Eland in Edinburgh. While details of her trial are scarce, her execution marked the start of a grim era, leading to infamous events like the North Berwick witch trials under King James VI. Fast forward to 1484, Pope Innocent VIII issued the papal bull Summis Desiderantes Affectibus, giving Heinrich Kramer and Sprenger the green light to hunt witches in Germany. This decree ramped up witch persecutions and aimed to clear up jurisdictional squabbles between local clergy and inquisitors. 2 years later, Kramer and Sprenger published the Malleus Maleficarum, a guide for identifying, prosecuting, and punishing witches. One of the most notable aspects of the Malleus Maleficarum is its specific focus on women. The authors argued that women were more susceptible to the temptations of the devil, were inherently weaker, both physically and morally, and thus more prone to sin and heresy. The text is filled with misogynistic views, portraying women as deceitful, lustful, and dangerous. It suggested that women were more likely to engage in witchcraft due to their supposed inherent flaws and weaknesses. This gendered perspective contributed to the widespread belief that witchcraft was predominantly a female crime, leading to the persecution and execution of countless women during the witch hunts of the early modern period. The socio-economic context of the time also played a role in the focus on women. Many women, especially those who were widowed, unmarried, or otherwise marginalized, were economically vulnerable and lacked the protection of a male guardian. This made them easy targets for accusations of witchcraft, as they were often seen as outsiders or burdens on the community. The Malleus Maleficarum capitalized on these vulnerabilities, providing a justification for the persecution of women who did not conform to the expected social norms. In 1532, Denmark's Witchcraft Act took a hard stance on sorcery. Minor magic resulted in exile, but deals with the devil garnered more severe punishments such as death. This law led to many witch trials, mostly targeting women, and lasted until 1686, when death sentences required High Court approval. 10 years later, England's Witchcraft Act under Henry VIII made witchcraft a felony punishable by death and property seizure. It sparked numerous trials and executions, mainly of women, but was criticised for being superstitious. The Act was repealed in 1547 during Edward VI's reign, reflecting changing attitudes and the Protestant Reformation's influence. In 1550, Wiesensteig, Germany saw one of history's most infamous witch trials, resulting in 63 executions. Fear and paranoia fueled brutal interrogations and forced confessions, with many marginalised women scapegoated for the community's woes. In 1572, the Torsåker witch trials began in Sweden, marking one of the most infamous episodes of witch persecution in the country's history. The trials took place in the small parish of Torsåker, located in the province of Angermanland. The trials resulted in the execution of a large number of individuals, mostly women, with estimates ranging from 71 to 100 people being beheaded and then burned at the stake. The Torsåker witch trials remain a stark reminder of the dangers of mass hysteria and the human capacity for cruelty in the name of righteousness. The mass execution took place on a hill outside the village, which became known as Balberget, or the Hill of Fire. Despite general society accepting the demonization of people practicing witchcraft or heresy, not all agreed with the harsh punishments of the Church. In 1584, in England, Reginald Scott published The Discovery of Witchcraft, a groundbreaking work that challenged the prevailing beliefs about witchcraft and the persecution of alleged witches. His book was one of the first to argue against the existence of witches and to criticize the methods used to prosecute them. Scott's work was a bold and controversial critique of the superstitions and irrational fears that fueled the witch hunts. The Discovery of Witchcraft is notable for its rational and scientific approach to the subject. Scott meticulously debunked various claims of witchcraft, providing natural explanations for phenomena that were often attributed to supernatural causes. He also exposed the tricks and deceptions used by charlatans and frauds to exploit people's fears. Scott's work was influential in shaping the debate about witchcraft and contributed to the gradual decline of witch hunts in England. The Trier witch trials, held between 1581 and 1593 in Germany, were among the largest and most brutal in history. Initiated by Archbishop Johann von Schonenberg, these trials aimed to eradicate witchcraft and heresy, leading to widespread hysteria and torture to extract confessions. Hundreds, including men, women, and children, were accused and often tortured into false confessions, resulting in death by burning. Fear and suspicion led to neighbours accusing each other, with entire families sometimes executed. The impact of the Trier witch trials was devastating. It is estimated that between 300 and 1,000 people were executed during this period, making it one of the deadliest witch hunts in history. In 1604, King James I of England, a big believer in witchcraft, passed the Witchcraft and Conjuration Act. This law was a serious upgrade from the 1563 Act, introducing the death penalty for summoning evil spirits or using witchcraft to harm others. It also expanded the definition of witchcraft to include charms, spells, and divination, making it easier to prosecute suspected witches. King James even wrote a book on witchcraft called Demonology. His new law led to more witch trials and executions until it was finally repealed in 1736. One of the most famous witch trials was the Pendle Witch Trials of 1612 in Lancashire. It all started when a young girl, Alison Device, was accused of cursing a peddler, John Law, causing him to have a stroke. Alison confessed and implicated others, including her own family and a rival family, the Chattoxes. This led to the arrest of 12 people, including Alison's mother and grandmother. The evidence was mostly based on confessions under torture and the testimony of Alison's 9-year-old sister, Janet Device, who accused her family of attending witches' sabbaths. The trials ended with the execution of 10 people by hanging, including Alice Nutter, who maintained her innocence until the end. In 1645, England witnessed the beginning of one of its most infamous witch hunts, led by Matthew Hopkins, who would later be known as the Witchfinder General. This period of intense witch hunting occurred during the English Civil War, a time of great social and political upheaval. Hopkins, along with his associate John Stern, claimed to have been appointed by Parliament to root out witches, although no official documentation supports this claim. Hopkins and Stern travelled across East Anglia, conducting witch trials and employing various methods to extract confessions from the accused. These methods included sleep deprivation, the swimming test, where accused witches were thrown into water to see if they would float, and physical examinations for witch marks. The witch hunt resulted in the execution of around 300 people, mostly women. The trials and executions were often based on flimsy evidence and confessions, obtained under torture as per standard. Hopkins' activities eventually drew criticism, and he faced accusations of profiteering and misconduct. By 1647, the witch hunt fervour began to wane, and Hopkins himself died later that year, possibly from tuberculosis. What a shame.